Hello, I'm Catherine Byers-White, your host of the Los Altos History Show. Our guests this evening are Cheryl and John Walker. Cheryl and John own and live in a farmhouse built in the first decade of this century by the Edwin Emerson family, one of the pioneering farming families of the Los Altos area. Welcome, Cheryl and John.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Good to have you. We had an opportunity to go out a few weeks ago to Cheryl and John's house and shoot some footage of the grounds and the surrounding areas, the tank house and the exterior of the house. And we'd like to roll that tape for our viewers right now. Let's roll that tape. We're here in front of the old Emerson house with Cheryl and John Walker. I understand the house is going to come up on a 100th year birthday. Are you planning a celebration?
Most definitely. I'm already thinking about it. It's only going to be 9 years from now, but we're going to certainly be celebrating the 100th birthday of Emerson House, and we hope to involve the whole community of Los Altos in it some way.
John, I see that there's another structure on the property. Could you tell me a little bit about it? What was it used for?
Well, sure. That's actually was built as a water tower. When this house was established, obviously it was a farming family lived here. They farmed the area and stored water up there. They would pump the water to the top. Inside that building, there are 6 redwood posts about 14 inches square, solid pieces, 2 stories high, to give you an indication of the kind of strength that's in there to support the weight of the water. Later on, they actually produced acetylene and piped it into the house to provide lighting, the gas for lighting for the house. All that had kind of a break, however, during the 1906 earthquake when those pipes were broken. But you'll notice if you drive around the Los Altos area and around parts of Northern California, you'll see some of these structures are still left, and that's really what they were for.
John, I understand that the old tank house was moved from the back of the property to the front of the house. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, that's very interesting. As a matter of fact, it was. In the late 70s, the people who bought the property before we did decided to subdivide. And the tank house actually straddled what is now the property line between our house and the adjacent property. So rather than destroy it, which would have actually saved him money, the owner decided instead to spend the money and have it moved to this other site on the property, facing now Miramonte Avenue. We're really glad that he did, because obviously it adds, we think, a lot to the property and our enjoyment of it.
I understand the home was built by a ship's carpenter. Are there any characteristics that are unique because of that?
Certainly can. Mr. Emerson had purchased all of the lumber and it was sitting in back while he was waiting to build the house, and he couldn't find a carpenter to build the house of his dreams for his family. And in one of his letters, which we found in the Mountain View historical section of the library, Mr. Emerson writes to his wife Annie, who was waiting in Oakland area with her children, the wonderful news that he had finally found a carpenter, Mr. Dave Morey, who lived in Mountain View and who was a ship's carpenter. And I think, John, see, how much did he? Well,
the amazing thing is he was paid the tremendous sum of about $3 a day to do this work, and he was quite skillful.
I noticed the window. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We don't know exactly why this was important to Mr. Emerson but this was one of the criteria that he had for the house, this unique diamond window. So when Dave Morey built the house, one of the things that Emerson insisted was that he build this particular window here at this location.
Great. How about if we head inside?
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay, go on in. There we go.
The beauty that surrounded this home is gone forever. In the spring, each tree in the prune orchard gave the impression of a huge popcorn ball. Looking down from the western foothills, the whole valley had a soft white carpet, especially in the light of the full moon. Later, the soft green leaves began to darken, and the petals began falling. Soon, the darker green leaves of late spring and summer moved in the soft breeze.
Cheryl and John share a love for football and actually met at a Stanford football game. Besides your interest in football, I understand you're both very interested in antiques and historical homes. Could you tell me a little bit how this interest in restoration began?
Well, I guess I'll answer that. Basically, John was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and he loved the history of the South and loved the antebellum homes. And when we met, that's one of the many interests that we shared together. In my own family, my grandmother had a pre-Revolutionary War home that she completely restored. My family had a historic home, and for the past 30 years, my own family has been very active in restoring and bringing to light the Mission Inn in Riverside, California.
That's wonderful. John, I understand you're an entrepreneur, and you've started 2 companies and now had a company called the Executive Group,
Right.
which assists executives in learning leadership and management skills. So it sounds like you're no stranger to taking on big projects. But when you walked into the home, how big of a restoration project did you walk into?
Well, it was like it was like a constant Murphy's Law, really. It's interesting trying to do an older home because you want to retain the character and the beauty and the spirit of it in a modern age when plumbing, threading is different and fixtures don't fit the same way, and the standard way homes are built now weren't done that way. So it really was frankly, a much bigger project than we thought it would be. Full of surprises as we go along. Open a wall and whoops, there's something you didn't expect.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
A lot of love went into it from
Sure.
what I saw. You also went to the community to ask people to volunteer information about the Emerson family and anything they knew about the home, did you not?
Once we moved into the house, we knew there had to be a great history. So Cheryl, as a history teacher and lover, I said, Cheryl, find out. There must be some people around who know. And she did a fabulous job.
It was absolutely incredible. When we first bought the house, we kept on saying, well, there must be a history to this house. And nobody could come forward. The real estate broker, we called people that we knew beforehand. So after this challenge that John had given me, basically I must have made 50 telephone calls and was finally, through the help of the community, able to find Miss Emerson to actually meet the 83-year-old then daughter her father had built the house. And she said to me, the house was built with a spirit of hospitality. They just opened their hearts to the people all around them. And she was so wonderful to share pictures and history and documentation. Subsequent to that, once there was an article in the Los Altos Town Crier telling about that, and that we were interested in reaching out to the community and asking their help. The telephone literally for 2 or 3 weeks didn't stop ringing with people calling and saying they remembered it when it was a convalescent home, or families that had grown up and could share their experiences growing up there. And so based on Miss Emerson's wonderful generosity of sharing material with us as well as the community, we really have been able to compile a wonderful history of the old house.
Well, let's go back a little bit in time. I understand the Emersons were established in America in the early part of the 17th century.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, John?
Actually, Silas Emerson moved to California in 1849 from the East Coast, and there are records indicating that he began as a civil engineer in San Francisco, probably involved with helping people establish their claims. So he must have been a well-educated man to do that. And then in the early 1850s, he actually acquired 900 acres in an area generally bounded by what's now Stevens Creek Road and Miramonte, and began farming, first wheat, then cattle. About 20 years later, his brother Carlos came out with his wife and 2 children. One of those 2 children, Edward, was the person who actually built the house we live in. The 2 brothers, Silas and Carlos, died around 1880, and Silas never having married, it was really Carlos's heirs who built the house. Now, this particular house was built in a period of 1902 to 1905. The original house was built on the other side of Permanente Creek, we think in an area about where Heritage Oak Park is, but it burned down in early 1902.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. I understand it did. The original farmhouse burnt to the ground and then rebuilt on another part of the property.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then it also survived the 1906 earthquake. So it's been through a lot.
Miss Emerson actually, when she came and visited the house, told the story of how she remembers experiencing the 1906 earthquake, and she showed exactly where she was and how she tried to get down this narrow hallway to get into her parents' bedroom, which is actually my husband's and my master bedroom, and how she could look out and see the barn behind the house, and just see the barn shaking and the house shaking, and yet it was wonderful. The house did not suffer any severe damage then, and we're proud to say in the 1989 earthquake, no damage again. We were very lucky.
Well, it definitely speaks to the structural integrity of the house and how well built and what work went into it. Let me ask you a little bit about your visit with Ethel. You mentioned her a couple of times, and that must have been a wonderful experience. And she came to the house, is that correct?
She came to the house. We had a reporter there who wrote the story of this encounter. She brought material, and what was also wonderful, a tape recorder. And so we literally, and she was not really very strong physically then, but she went from room to room and would describe how it was. She brought sketches that she had carefully put together about how each room was, and even went upstairs and she could point out Ralph's bedroom, which is my son's Devon's bedroom, my son Quinn's bedroom. Her mother was a midwife, and that's where she would help any of the farm hands. If the women came into labor, the children were born in that second room, which is my son Quinn's room. And then our family sitting room was her bedroom. So she was able to give us so much wonderful details about how the house was then, and see the contrast.
Well, her ancestor, or is it her father, right, Edwin Emerson? Now, he was an entrepreneur to some extent himself, like yourself, John. Can you tell me a little bit about why he would subdivide the property? And I understand he did that, and what his motives and might have been behind doing that.
Well, actually, it started in the early 1890s. He petitioned to have a road put in, which was Emerson Road, was approved in 1892. It's now called Covington Road.
It was changed in the 50s.
To connect to San Antonio Road, to be able to take the fruit from this area to San Antonio, where the packing houses were, which he helped found. And this was in concert with a more general promotion, really, of California as an orchard farming area, fruit farming. And seizing that opportunity, he actually subdivided the 900 acres into 10 and 20 acre parcels, which was about the size farm that a single family could manage. And thereupon, kept a large portion for himself.
Now, I understand, too, everything that the house went through, the people in the house, the earthquake, the house burned down, that they actually ended up losing the home. Can you tell me?
That was a tragic story.
Yes.
In 1920, they had to spend what to then was a lot of money, about $5,000, to drill for water. The water table had gone down. So they took out a loan from the bank. They didn't have the loan paid off when the Depression hit and were unable to pay the loan, so the bank foreclosed on the property.
Oh, no.
And dispossessed the Emersons.
That's too bad. I understand, too, in being around the property, you found little artifacts as well. Can you tell me about that?
Well, we're always finding something. I remember the kids were playing in the yard, it must have been 8 or 9 years ago, and they came in with a 6-pointed star, which we had researched. It was actually a vigilante star from San Francisco around the turn of the century. We think it probably came down with some of the people who were refugees after the earthquake and camped there. There have been other interesting household utensils.
Coke bottle.
An very old Coke bottle. Obviously, instruments used in farming.
Leaded window. That beautiful leaded window.
Yeah. And the land was farmed by immigrants. And who were they? The people who worked the farm?
Well, the farms were worked by the Chinese and by the Mexicans, and also Miss Emerson, when she pointed out Quinn's room, which is where the children were born, that there were some Czechoslovakian and Polish people who would come and help pick the fruit, and so there was really quite a variety of immigrants who worked around the farm and were the laborers around the farm.
Boy, there's a lot of rich history there on that property, isn't there?
It sure is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you both, what is it you love particularly about the home? What aspects of it, what features are your favorites?
Why don't you answer first, Cheryl?
I think when we first saw the home, we thought, what a fabulous place for the children to grow up. And I think, as Miss Emerson said, it's a house for children. And in all of her memoirs that are in the Los Altos History House, she talks about what it was like to be a child there. And there's dormered rooms and there's secret passageways. And so in that regard, we just thought it had a house of character that would be great for our children to grow up. In particular, I love the moldings. And second to that, I guess, the wonderful fireplaces. Nothing's better than to wake up in the cold chill of a winter's morning and turn on those fireplaces, and quickly it takes the chill out of the air, and it's very cozy.
And how about you, John?
Well, I also like the warmth of the home. It has it feels like a place where people ought to live and be happy and share with others, and I like that about it. It's full of interesting corners.
Whimsy.
Whimsy. It has a feeling that causes your imagination, at least my imagination, to soar about what if we did this, what if we did that. The tank house, which you saw earlier, was one of the things that really intrigued me when we first bought it. The possibilities. And of course, it's been a great place for the kids to grow up.
Well, tell me a little bit more about the possibilities. When you went into the home, you saw that there was quite a bit of work to do. Tell me about the restoration process and what you've done, what you're currently working on.
Well, there were some real pleasant surprises. The first day we were in the house, I go to work and I come home and the front porch is piled with all this magenta and orange shag carpet, which is the floor, and Cheryl had uncovered hardwood floors, which were beautiful. We've done a lot of repairing, bringing things up to more modern standards, resurfacing floors, ceilings, walls, a lot of landscaping work, those kinds of things. We have improved. The house has a fruit cellar, which was a subject of Ed Emerson's delight when he was building it. He was very proud of that. And we've recently put a concrete floor in there, and we're making better use of that.
Tell us about his letter you discovered.
Yes, he wrote this letter while he was building the house, in which he described the cellar as a place why it's so big you could even play football in there.
Well, you also brought a copy of that letter. Do you want to share a little bit of that with us?
Oh dear.
Where it is.
There it is.
Well, this was written on March 22nd, 1903. So Ed is writing to his wife, Annie. who's staying with relatives near Oakland. He says, "We're getting along very nicely, but it seems slow as a matter of course. But we'll get there all right if we keep at it. The wall sets as we go along, so there will not be much, if any, delay on account of green walls. The cellar is going to be a dandy when completed. There'll be no better in the neighborhood. 19 by 32. Big enough for a gym for the children to play in when it rains or when the sun's too hot. 8-foot ceiling, high enough for a swing and crossbars, and long enough for a football game."
That's great.
I just love the pride in this man's writing to his wife, talking about that.
Now, when we came out to the home, you had told me that a ship's carpenter helped build the home, which is unusual. Can you talk a little bit more about that? We saw the front window. Any other features within the home?
Drawers.
There were a number of features. He had difficulty finding a carpenter in those days, and since there was so much shipbuilding in around the Bay Area, eventually he found a ship's carpenter. There are drawers built into the walls in 2 rooms, and these are built with handles and carve out and little notches, much like you'd find drawers on a boat. Clearly some of the molding is handmade, and some of the fixtures for holding frames for the windows are fitted to the windows, much like you would find on a ship where things are individually done. Yeah.
Now, I understand now you're working on the cellar. What are you doing there?
Well, we put a floor in there.
It was dirt.
It was dirt, and we've done some other kind of bringing it up to more modern standards so we can make better use of it.
Actually, it's going to be an exercise room for the family, so it's going to be a lot of fun. It's so cool in the summertime, and it's so warm and cozy in the wintertime, so we can see projects going on down there and a workbench and so
That's
forth.
wonderful, wonderful plans. Well, how about the future? You talk about 9 years, I know is a ways away, but talk about a birthday party for the home and involving the community a little bit in that. Could you tell me a little bit about some plans or pipe dreams you have about that?
Well, I think our dreams are to open the house and perhaps let this occasion be a focal point for the city of Los Altos to reflect a little bit on the rich heritage that it has. Exactly what format, I think we've got some years to plan that, but our sense is we'd like to be able to allow this event to catalyze some thoughts. Of course, one of our dreams is we'd love to see the name Emerson memorialized in the name of a road or a school, which it almost was once before. And perhaps something can be done about that.
Cheryl, I understand you have an extensive background, and to some extent you too, John, in restoration of homes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in growing up in the South, we have a great love, I think, of homes in the South, and particularly antebellum homes. And my mother and I used to visit those in the area and study them and think about what it might be like. But I think Cheryl's had really hands-on experience growing up in a family that's done this.
I think also what's interesting is that when it was time for us to come back, and we waited a long time to move back to Los Altos, my husband went sailing. And then he said, as he went off to go sailing, "Find me a house with character. I want a house with character." And so I found this house, and it was my family's background of extensive historical remodeling of historical homes that almost gave me the confidence to come back to my husband and say, "Look, I don't know raising 2 small children whether we're really ready for this kind of a challenge, but I found you a house with a little bit of character," and he agreed. But as far as my own family background is concerned, my grandmother had the most incredible pre-revolutionary war home in New Jersey. And as a child, I just remember this incredible home with the beautiful moldings and the rich patina of the floors and the thick walls, and behind the fireplace, the curling stairs that were led up to the slaves' quarters. And so that was my background. And then when my family moved to Southern California, my parents bought an incredible turn-of-the-century Spanish home that was in terrible neglect and brought it back to life. And so I kind of grew up with painters and wall finishers and floor finishers and all. And so
It's
also,
definitely in the blood.
right. Interestingly enough, we were very involved in the city of Riverside, California. Is a city block large hotel. It's called the Mission Inn, and the Mission Inn is absolutely incredible. And we fought for 30 years to help find a purchaser for the inn and to actually see it come back to life, and it's just done that this year. And all of a sudden now everybody is bringing wonderful artifacts back to the inn, and so having this background, when my husband says, look, we've got to get the walls, and the walls have to be mudded smooth, I knew I had to work hard to find somebody who would do that. And truly, I must say, the craftsmen that we have been able to find, and lots of times the projects wouldn't really start on time or as quickly as we anticipated, because the challenge was to find the craftspeople who could come in and actually do a good job. But we found them, and also there's kind of a spirit of love that seems to occur when you get involved in a project like this. And we've had a painter that will be mindful of our budget and will come at a better time, or he'll say, no matter what, I want to paint the house because the challenge is something that I want to do. And so you really do, once you find the right craftspeople, get an incredible amount of cooperation and sense of caring, which is quite remarkable.
Well, John, you had mentioned a little bit about some of the wonderful surprises in the home. What were some of the difficulties in restoring the home? I can imagine it's a huge project, a huge undertaking.
It is, and I think we didn't appreciate the extent of it. There are really a couple of different types of drawbacks or considerations, I think, that were we to do it again, or for anyone else thinking about it. One clearly are the surprises. The walls you open up and it isn't the way you thought it would be. You start one project and it rapidly builds into others.
Bigger.
And the projects tend to get bigger and more complex. Clearly that's part of it. Finding the right kind of craftsman adds a challenge, but it's also a reward. Living in a house while you're doing it and taking this time is also something that has to be factored in. At the time that we bought the house, our kids were preschool, and our oldest son developed asthma. So it really limited the way in which we couldn't tear down walls and create dust, and so we had to be quite careful about that.
And there were periods
of time when it just really was inappropriate to work on the project. It was really time to be with the family and to spend time with the kids. At about that time, I was also starting one of my companies, and as everyone who knows has been involved with a startup, that's very time-consuming. So balancing these things out was a challenge.
But somehow you did it, it sounds like.
Somehow we did it.
We really, really want to thank you for having us in your home. Los Altos viewers, this has been a special treat for them and for me as well.
Thanks for
you
the
very
opportunity.
much. And good luck to you both in
Thank
restoring
you.
it. It's a beautiful
you.
start.
Thank you.
I'm Catherine Byers-White. Please join us next time on the Los Altos History Show. Goodbye for now.